Okay, so today we are assembling the Anglerfish. It's going to be an ESP32 driven microscope inside a jar that's widely available. So it's a bon moment jar with your favorite marmalade. And what we have here are all the parts we need: the glass, some wires, 3D printed parts, the screws, some electronics, and some tools, and also the programmer. So I'm assuming you already flashed the ESP32 prior to the assembly, so that we can start with the assembly right away. Once you've assembled it, it's rather complicated to also flash it since it's enclosed, even though we also provide you an over-the-air update, so everything becomes a little easier. So we require you to have some soldering skills, but the rest should be rather simple. All right, so let's start with flashing the firmware. So we won't tell you all the details how to flash it right now in the video. There are some more descriptions in the online documentation, however. So we have the camera module, the AI Tinker, and you also need to have this flashing tool. So this just connects the USB to the UART, and you have to wire the whole thing up. So there are a bunch of tutorials how to do that. I'll just briefly explain. So they have 5-volt ground, receive and transmit. So you have to use those two lanes here and there, and then also the power. And then don't mix up the power, of course, because otherwise you will burn the the ESP. So this is ground, so the yellow goes to ground. Then the 5 volts belong here. Well, I'm always messing it up. So the R receive goes to U receive, which is, transmit, which is right here. And then the other one goes here. And then in order to enable booting into the flash mode, you also have to shortcut ground and pin 0. And then you plug in this bit into your computer. In this case, it's a Mac system, but you can use any system there is. And I'm just doing that. So here we have the USB wire, and if everything goes right, we can start the serial, and then we can have a look on its output. So here on the Arduino IDE, you look for the serial, and in best case, you get prompted with the serial, which I don't see right now. Which in that case, it's a weird number, def, cu, USB, whatever. So we hit that, we open the serial port, and then we can also hit the reset button. And if there's something appearing on the screen, then you are properly connected. So there's already some firmware flashed, but we'll reflash it. So you have to hit the reset button, and then also shortcut the ground pin to the I0, which is right here. So you have to hold the reset pin, and then, well, this one's also connected to ground. And then on the serial monitor, you see that it says wait for download. Then you open the flash thing here. Eventually you also have the code, and then maybe you've swiped the SSID and the password, and then you hit the upload button. Then it's getting compiled and it loads up. This may take some time, so I would just get that. So now the firmware is successfully uploaded, and we can check again, going to the serial button and hit the reset button here. So then you will see a bunch of output here. The Anglerfish software will start. It will search for the SSID, which by default is blink, where the password is 12345678. And if it doesn't find it, it's automatically saying, I haven't found it, so I'll open a new access point. And so then you just guide through Microscope in your Wi-Fi settings, and then you directly find the according network, and then you guide to your browser, and the captive portal will tell you to connect to your nearby network. So it will search for nearby networks. So for example, you can create a network from your cell phone. In this case, again, it's Blink for some unknown reason, and then you hit 12345678. In that case, it's just the password we use for development, and then it automatically will connect to that SSID. So I'll do that also with my laptop. And then you'll see the serial prompt that there is something connecting to the Blink network. You just copy paste the IP address, or the right fraction of it, and then it should work. So now I'm connected to Blink, the Anglerfish software is opening, and then you can, for example, start the stream, where the camera will then start streaming. The flash eventually will pop up, I can also turn it down. There's also the opportunity for a lens, which is not connected yet. And I think the stream is just overexposed, so that's why we don't see anything. Now it should work. Also the gain should be 0. And then you can play with the settings. For example, now the exposure time is set to some reasonable value. Also, you see that we already unscrewed the lens. So this should not be the default. So the default looks rather something like this here, where you have the camera lens still inside the camera assembly. Well, I don't really see that. We unscrew one later so that you see how that works. Okay, since we're done with the flashing part, we can continue. So I just disconnect the assembly here from the computer and also remove the computer. So now we're continuing with the camera. So this here goes into the base. And so I have one part which you probably don't have, but this usually goes, it looks very similar to the programmer. So now we continue. So we have a bunch of parts we will just put aside for the moment. And so what we are doing right now is connecting some wires to the ESP32, which are essentially controlling the lens here. This is for focusing. For this, you would need a transistor. You can also already plug in the micro SD card. And we also connect a USB cable to your battery. That's also powering the device. And this is happening right now. So we just move everything aside. We have this piece here for soldering so that the table stays nice. And we are just going to do that now. So what we are doing is, so this is a PNP transistor. The order is BCE, so base connector emitter. And we already have the lens here, which is a M12 focusing lens from a CCTV lens. And so we already wired up the two connections here. I always confuse with plus and minus, so we have to find that out. Eventually we have to change order. One thing eventually, so this lens comes with two different variations, either with this base connected and some don't have it. You can easily break it apart. It's just some very brittle plastic. So we just use pliers to just unrip it. Well, you have to be a bit careful with the wires, but other than that, I think it's pretty easy. And so what we're going to do now is, so this part here goes in here. So we have to make sure that the wires in the end follow this path. So we have to cut out this piece here, and then the lens essentially mounts here, so that it's fitting in here. Maybe a bit too perfect, so I have to get rid of a bit more material. Almost perfect. So now it's kind of done. So this way you can make sure that the lens sneaks in here, press fit, and then the wires go here. And this here then is connected to the PNP transistor, which I'm showing you now. So as I said, the base is controlled by the ESP. So this connects to a pin I'm showing you later. So we need one wire. This here goes to one pin, which you'll also see in the sketch. So first of all, I just add some lead to all the pins. That makes it a little easier to solder. Make sure you do a proper connection. And then we hook up one of the wires to the 5 volts, the other one to the collector, and then the emitter goes to ground. That's how we use the transistor here. And the transistor essentially just switches the pulse width modulated output of the ESP. So here we remove the isolation, add some lead, and then we also add that to the transistor. And it can be any transistor, so the current is not so large. So this here goes to ground, but I also showed you in a sketch. So then this here connects to the ground of your camera. So there are multiple ground connections. Doesn't really matter which you use, and we can directly do that on top of the device. So for example, layers. Make sure that you don't form a shortcut. So that's how it goes. The ground. And also this here goes to plus 5 volts. And the 5 volts, for example, right here. Always make sure that it's a proper connection, so it's not a cold connection which eventually breaks over time. So this here now is everything you should do for the lens. So 5 volt goes to the lens, the output of the lens goes to the transistor, and then the emitter goes to the ground. And the missing part now is the base, which is connected to the switching pin of the ESP. So we take one more wire and connect that to the base. of the transistor. And the end goes to the switching pin. Which is number 12. So you add some lead again, make sure pin is clean, and then you add that to 2, 14, 15, 13, oh, that's already a shortcut, number 12. That's pretty much it now. And so 12 goes to the base, and then you amplify the signal for the lens. So the missing bit now is hooking up the power. And for this, we need a lithium-ion battery. You can get them on eBay. And also a small device that converts the 3.8 volts, 7 volts, sorry, to the 5 volts for the ESP. So you hook up this here, so it's working as a power bank, so you can charge it, and then you can also consume it. And for this, we wire this part here to the power bank adapter. So we again remove the isolation. Add some lead. And connect, of course, ground to minus. And plus to the red one. So that's that part here. So you have a small power bank now. So you can also take another one, but this is the smallest combination of power bank you can get. And then you have to wire whatever USB cable you find to the ESP so that it can connect to the freshly created power bank. So for this, we again remove the isolation. The tricky part here with this one. And then what you have typically are at least the red and the black wires, so you can just cut away the rest. And then you have plus and minus connecting to 5 volts and ground again. And strategy, adding lead and then wiring that up to the ESP32, knowing that we already occupy the 5 volts, so we have to piggyback it. Make them a little shorter so that don't do any shortcut. And then, yeah, use the 5 volts and ground nearby. And this is everything you need. So 5 volts, ground, and then 5 volts for this bit here. So that's it. And what you can do now is connecting this here to the freshly connected power bank. If the battery is already charged, you can just plug it in, and then it should give you 5 volts, but I doubt that, yeah, it's already working. So what you just heard was the lens going up and down, so that's just the boot up check. So if you connect it, you can hear the sound, and also see that the lens is moving. Yes, so everything works. So we are done with the soldering. And we can continue, so we get rid of these tools, clean up the workspace a bit. And so one thing you probably don't have is this bit here, but it's just a spacing utility, which is actually the same size as your programmer. So the red one we just had usually does not come with your setup, so you just put in your ESP camera in the programmer, then you add this little bit here, which mounts to the camera so that this is in the right place. So this here makes sure that the camera is tightly fixed. See that here? And then this whole assembly here goes in here. So make sure that this bit here is coming for the SD card. So you sneak that in, and then make sure that the wires are finding their proper way. So, and then this camera here moves into this hole here, and so make sure that you align this properly. So the SD card bit here also should orient it the way that the SD card is right there. Make sure that the wires are not hitting the LED, which is right here, because then it's getting blocked and we cannot use it for our illumination. So this is almost it. And we can now close this assembly with M3 screws. So we're going to do that now with some random screws. So these are M3 screws with a cylindrical head. And because I'm lazy, I'm using this battery-driven thing. So can you just use two? That's fine. And then need to make sure that the camera is actually placed correctly inside this thing, which right now it's not, so we have to adjust it again. So that looks good. Everything's tightly put together. And we can continue. So the next bit is mounting the the magnets. So what you see here is 3 different holes here. And for this we need these magnets, so you can place them inside the holes. And then they are creating the force that's pushing away the whole assembly in order to focus. So depending on how hard it is for you to put it in, you can also use a tool. The skin is usually quite so this way all the magnets are inside, so you can really press them in to the very bottom end so that they are fitting to the end here. So now everything is put in there correctly. And so then the stage bit is moving in the way that you have the counterpart. So you have 3 holes for the magnets, and they are essentially just pressing away or getting pressed away from the magnetic forces. So you have to make sure that this hole matches that one. And now we have to find the correct orientation. For this I have brought a pen so that you can mark the orientation based on the opposite side. So what you do now is start with that one. And so you know now that this here is the direction which should go inside this thing here. So they should point outwards. So we are going to do that now. So now all the magnets point away from each other. So that's correct. So the last bit is make sure that all the magnets are tightly packed in. And then we can use screws to establish the mechanism, the focusing mechanism. So one thing I found out is that this cable is better to come out of this direction. So we just open it again quickly and make sure the wire is going the other way. So once everything is snapped in again, we can continue. There we go. So now we can use this mechanism. And maybe we also use some glue to fix the lens here. So we use some glue to mount the lens inside the casing, so otherwise it will always get off. some tiny mounts on the metal part, and then we wait for a moment. It's just some random glue we just found. Okay, so we can continue now. And so the next challenge would be to have screws acting as the So the next challenge is to create the focusing mechanism. For this we have to place screws inside the holes that are pulling the whole mechanism towards the camera. So for this we have these M3 screws again, yours can be different. And so we insert them in the holes here. And its advantage is to use the Allen key, because this is longer. Your tool may differ. And then with this you have to find the right hole. In this case it's this hole here, and then you have to essentially screw this thing in here. And so this plate here mounts to the bottom of the glass, so in the end it will stick to that, and then we observe through this glass here, through the bottom here. Focusing stage, so it's completely not aligned, as you see, is completely odd. But if you rotate the Allen key, you see that this distance between the screw and the stage here is reducing, and that way you can tune the distances here. So you can essentially move it up and down in focus. That's the whole point. So here we'll make it a little tighter. And then the next step is to mount the lens, and then finally mount this on the jar lid. So one thing we haven't done yet is removing the lens. So this usually comes a little earlier, but we have to do that now. So this is a bit of a tricky part, because you have to unscrew the lens here, which surprisingly is difficult. So there's no tool as, like, for example, for the Raspberry Pi. So I have pliers that are relatively sharp, and so we are hitting the gear-like structure and then just start rotating it. In between we can also get rid of the glue here. And you see it's getting a little messy, but it's in the end working out. You have to be careful to not scratch the lens at all, so be really careful. And once so you see it has a small threading and it's going inside here. And so this step had to be done beforehand, of course. So what we have to do now is adapting this lens into this M12 adapter, and then we are pretty much done. So in the meantime, we can make sure that this lid here gets a hole so that we can look through it. So for this we use a wooden board, and then use the power drill with a large piece of drill bit. And then we are using this as a template so that we know where to drill. So this is the illumination mount for the Toslink fiber. So the center has to be, of course, in the center, and then this here is the hole for the LED on the ESP32. So we use again our pencil or whatever marking tool you have, make a hole in the center, and then also right here. So I'll just do it here. And then we use the drill bit and make a hole right here, and then in the center again. Be careful, it can be dangerous, so because it can start flapping around. Yeah, so what I'm going to do now is first marking it and then drilling it from the other side. So you see that there's a mark, because otherwise it might be really difficult. So you see the two marks. It's easier to drill like that because then you have something underneath. And then with the wood. This is the first hole, and then the second. So now you have the two holes here, and this will match up with what's coming on top here. And then we have to mount the cover glass, which is our incubation platform, so to say. So this here has to be mounted on here, and it has also to be sealed. So we use some kind of glue that's sealant, like for example, silicon or, well, eventually hot glue, but this doesn't work at cold temperatures in the sea, for example. So we have to add some of the parts here. And make sure that you don't cover the holes. Add lots of stuff so that it's getting sealed properly, so that there's no way that there's any air coming in. So I just use lots of stuff. And then use some spare 3D printed part to put it away. So for example here, I just make sure that it's not too close to the hole so that it's blocking the optics eventually, but everything's fully covered. So like that, roughly. And then you can add your cover glass, clean it well before, use cotton tooth, and then yeah, just place it, be brave, and make sure that you're not squeezing any of the material in the hole, because this is then cannot get rid of it anymore. Roughly like that. So then you have a hole here for the camera, and this is for the LED illumination. So we are dealing with the last remaining bits. So we have to mount the lens here inside this adapter for the M12 mount. So the lens here moves inside this adapter, and the adapter then can be placed inside here, like that. And then you're done. And so the next bit would be this here mounts here. We add some glue and make sure that the hole for the illumination is aligned that way so that the illumination can be transferred here. And then you're pretty much done. And we are going to do that now. So, but before we also set up the illumination. So this is the part for the illumination, and only two things have to be done. So we have to mount the Toslink adapter. For this we need again some M3 screws. So we put them through the holes. And add the part here. With this we can then also add the Toslink cable. And so the Toslink is a fiber that's used for optics, for audio. And so what I'm doing right now is just blocking it. So the idea is to have the LED from the device as an illumination. And you can also visualize that when I'm turning on the flash and pointing it towards the flash, you see we can make use of it as an illumination source. Right. And so this here just plugs in on one side, make sure it's tightly packed in, and also make a twist so then it's getting a bit more compact. So there's one direction that's a little loose, so make sure that's in the correct direction, and then it looks like that here. And with this we can then put that on top of our lid. You will already see that it's not fully tightly packed, so for this we can use the cable ties. So for this I have two, and then we just need to wrap it around and then tightly seal it. And once it's fully through, you cannot really move it anymore. That's it then. Then you can get rid of the auxiliary parts, and you're done. So the illumination gets here, and then you transmit it through the objective lens. That's it. So now we have to insert the lens into the barrel that is mounting it to the M12 lens assembly. So we have to push it inside the plastic so that it becomes parallel to the ground here. And then once this is done, we can press fit it in here, and then we are done. So make sure that's tightly mounted. You can also add some glue, and then you see that this moves up and down, and then you're done. Make sure the lens is parallel to the stage, like almost so. And then you're done. And this here, the upper part, still has to be glued in this assembly so that the lens here comes in here. So I must admit it would be easier to get rid of the illumination part again. So we just unmount that here. And so what's important is that the lens here looks through the hole, and the other hole here is essentially going through this hole, and then you're done. So we're going to do that now. And we again add some glue. So again, you add some glue. And make sure the light can go through. And then, yeah, carefully mount it that way, so that the lens is pointing here. So you see the lens here, and the LED will come through this point here. And that's it. You are done. And then once everything is sealed and tight, you can also wrap around some tape through around the transistor so that this is not creating any shortcut. You turn this on, and then you can put everything in here. And then add the illumination. And then you're done.